All right, good Monday afternoon, everyone. Thanks for stopping by for a check of your forecast. Hope everyone's doing well today. It is December 15th, year of our Lord 2025, and it's a bit past 4 o'clock here in Amarillo. We've got some warm weather on deck for the high plains. We'll break that down for you here over the next several minutes. We do have a cold front that we'll talk about for later this week. Probably will make things fairly windy, at least in a short window, whenever that front does blow through. So we'll have to break that down. And then we're going to take a look at kind of that long range forecast, where we stand. Are we going to see a regime change or some kind of pattern shift over the next 2 weeks? Again, your foreshadowing is probably not. And if you're dreaming of a white Christmas, that may be your only getaway from the warm weather this year if you live in Amarillo. Let's go ahead and break down your forecast. Current conditions, you can see we've got some high level clouds moving in from New Mexico. This is a very subtle shortwave feature. There's just not much moisture to work with it, but we are going to see again probably a surface trough slash weak cold front come through tonight. It's not going to be a big shift in our temperatures. Again, we're still very warm up here in the northern plains and central plains, but this is going to again move from west to east overhead. You can see the dry slot starting to fill in with this one. That system just way too weak. That ridge has really eaten up much of the vertical motion associated with that system. So all we have associated with it is a lot of high clouds. You can see that from our sky cam there in Dimmitt. Those clouds, again, way up off the ground. You can still see some virga there, but a lot of that's evaporating before it gets to the ground. In fact, all of it is in similar conditions there from Clovis, New Mexico, looking in a south and east direction. You can see those clouds not quite as thick as you get further east across the Panhandles, but Follette looking west, you can see there are some high clouds there present. They'll continue to fill in as we get further into tonight. But temperatures are above normal. Our average high is 52 degrees. So we're about 10 degrees above normal right now here in Amarillo. Some thicker clouds have left us a bit on the colder side the further south you go. Again, just less daytime heating out there with a lack of sunshine, but most of us are above average for our temperatures. Winds are from the south around 10 to 20 miles per hour. For tonight, we are expecting a light freeze, normal low being 25, 26 degrees. And then heading into tomorrow, we are expecting another warm day ahead. Temperatures will climb back up into those mid 60s. We'll likely see a similar day to today. High clouds probably to start, clearing out as we get into the evening with that system moving from west to east. So here's the forecast highs for tomorrow. 64 in Amarillo, 67 there in Tucumcari, Tulia, and Dimmitt, 68 in Boise City, and 70 degrees for that high there in Paducah. Let's go ahead and run you through the computer model. Again, there is that very subtle trough slash front coming through in the morning. You'll notice again the wind shift, but temperatures probably unimpacted by that surface trough. As we get into Wednesday, we'll see more of a southwest wind in the afternoon. I think that's going to help us warm up. The model not really amped about getting into the higher 60s, but with the southwest downslope wind, I think it's going to be a very high likelihood that our temperatures overachieve like they did this past week on that last Thursday when we got close to some record highs. In fact, we did set a couple of record highs in Dalhart and Borger, just not in Amarillo. So similar conditions, that west-southwest wind, downsloping, a lot of sunshine. I wouldn't be shocked if we see some low 70s in some mixed areas on Wednesday afternoon, but a lot of us should get into the higher 60s. And then there's that next front blowing through on Thursday morning. You can see that northerly wind, at least calm to start. I do think that we'll probably see some stronger winds than what's being portrayed on the in-house model. There are some higher resolution models out there, even the blend of models showing winds could be sustained around 20 to 30 on Thursday, which would be on the strong side. I would expect us probably to see gusts higher than that. Now, the higher end gusts, the exact location still is a little bit up in the air, but most of our higher resolution models do point towards maybe central Oklahoma seeing more of the strong winds closer to that trough as it sweeps across the area compared to us here in the Panhandles. Now, we'll still probably get a glanced blow of those stronger winds. The further east you get, though, the worse it's going to be. And the winds will be out of the north on Thursday. It's going to have a bite to it. Temperatures will be near normal in the 50s with that cold front pushing through and across the area. I wouldn't expect grass fires to be a huge concern for us. Now, with that being said, even though humidity is probably going to be a little bit elevated, when winds get that strong, if one does get going, they have a tendency to spread in the winter months, even though the temperature's kind of cold. So it's just something to think about. You may want to avoid those activities that start a fire, just again with the winds that we'll be dealing with on Thursday. They could be gusting anywhere from 35 to 55 miles an hour, just depending on which side of the panhandles you are on. I think New Mexico, maybe not as windy as the eastern half of the area. But if a fire does get going, probably going to spread, especially if the fuel is present with those kind of winds, even if the humidity is up. So just keep that in mind. Now, the long-term forecast, and we'll get into why this is the case here in just a second, features a lot of warm weather. In fact, we're going to be well above our climatological norm for Christmas, it seems, this year. I think it's a possibility that it's kind of like a Joe Nichols kind of day, sunny and 75 for Christmas. Santa may want to wear some short sleeves and a t-shirt and some shorts if he's tooling around in the Lone Star State for this year. So that's something that we'll probably have to look forward to. It's not going to be a very cold Christmas this year. Don't expect it to be a white Christmas. Maybe a brown Christmas with some windier conditions. That is something that's starting to show up a little bit on some of our forecast models. Now, notice our chances to be below normal for precipitation. Again, that confidence is relatively high for the south central plains, which does cover the panhandles here. Now, if you notice California, they're expected to be fairly wet, and we're going to talk about why that's the case. So I'm going to go ahead and run you through a couple of our deterministic models just to show you again what some of this stuff looks like. Looks like that's probably going to be your best bet. So we're looking at, again, basically just the entire North America, the entire North American continent. So we're going to start this out at today. Anything in orange and red is noted by a big ridge over those areas, and then you've got big troughs aloft. You can see there's one over the Gulf of Alaska, and again, we're going to watch this feature. We've lost a lot of our progression, and it looks like we may lose a lot of that progression, at least in the lower latitudes, as we head into the second half of December. So here's that first system. This is the one that's going to bring in all of that cold air on Thursday and probably some of those windier conditions. Again, the closer you are to this low, the windier it's going to be. Probably some kind of blizzard setup in the Midwest with that one, but for us, it's going to be dry. It's just going to be cold and windy. But then notice that ridge in the Southwest U.S. It kind of builds back in after we get through the weekend. And this thing really becomes pretty dominant as we get close to Christmas Day. This is Monday, heading into Tuesday of next week. Very big ridge over the eastern 2/3, really 3/4 of the country. We do get some troughing out here, though, just off of British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest. And we would love to see this ridge maybe push even further east. If it continues to push east over, say, the Carolinas or New England, that's going to allow for a trough to set up more over the west half of the continent rather than just off the coast. But as we play through this, you can see that first little wave doesn't really get through the interior mountains of the Rockies. We've got another low kind of diving south close to Northern California around Christmas Day. Exact placement and strength, again, still very much up in the air at this point. Exact details blurry when you're talking about 10 to 14 days out. But just notice the general pattern. That ridge is just stuck right off towards our east-northeast, and anything that tries to push inland off the west coast falls apart relatively quickly, and then we get that ridge to just continue to build back in, and unfortunately that trough just struggles to make any kind of progression from west to east. But there is going to be a big upper level trough that probably lives out here in the Gulf of Alaska, big ridge of high pressure over in the Bering Sea. Again, you can see there's a shortwave trough here overhead. I wouldn't put much weight in that, but that's the forecast pattern that we're probably going to be dealing with for the extended period. You can see again just that ridge. There's that trough coming through later this week. So that's kind of the only shift in the pattern that we really see outside of just that big ridge building in as we get close to Christmas, and it just kind of dominating the forecast all the way up until the end of December. You can see again there's maybe something with that little trough coming through after Christmas, but again, with how dominant the ridge is going to be, it may suffocate that thing before it can get even over our heads. It may be something like what we're dealing with today, where yeah, there's a short wave moving through and that upper level low, but no moisture, warm core aloft, probably no moisture associated with it, but maybe other than some winds on the back side. So that's kind of the pattern that we're stuck in, and unfortunately, it does not look like that's going to break anytime soon. So through the next 2 weeks, you're probably going to see a lot of sunshine in our 7-day tracker. You're going to see a lot of above average temperatures in there. And we're not talking about 5 or 10 degrees above normal either. Again, with that ridge as dominant as it is and being as close in proximity to the Texas Panhandle, it's possible we see a lot of 70s over the next couple of weeks. Now, there's probably a lot of us that are okay with that. But I will preface, even though we did see a little bit of some moisture at the end of November, that's not going to carry us very far. Here's our 30-day anomalies for precipitation. You can see we are a little bit above normal. So in that regard, it was nice to see some moisture at the end of November, but it wasn't for anyone. Again, it was kind of hit and miss. You know, a little below normal there in Roosevelt County, definitely below normal in a big swath of the southeast panhandle. We'd love to put some moisture in the ground. And again, that would certainly help our wildfire potential as we head into the early spring months. As you guys know, that's usually our peak for big fires here in the high plains. I mean, wildfire season's already technically sort of arrived, but with those cooler conditions around, it does make things a little bit harder to get a big fire going. But as we move into February, as we move into March, I mean, we're already going to be dealing with a lot of those above average temperatures over the next couple of weeks. If we couple the winds with it and we see those temperatures in the 70s, that may be a more common thing to talk about is that wildfire potential, which is something that we'd love to steer away from. So we would love some more moisture, even though we did see some in the end of November. And we're probably not going to see it over the next 2 weeks. So I would expect us to probably have some fire concerns at some point, becoming a more common topic here in the Weather Center. That's all I've got for you guys this afternoon. Thank you so much for stopping by. Make sure you hit that like button, and